Hi, all. Welcome to the panel discussion, Mischief, Mishaps, and Mayhem. My name is Louis Lauer, Library Media Specialist for Fargo Public Schools, and your moderator for this panel. In this session, we will be talking to 3 graphic novel creators about their upcoming titles and get a peek into the mischief, mishaps, and mayhem that they've created for young readers. So let us welcome our panel. Cartoonist and creator of the Ham Housing graphic novel series, Rich Moyer brings readers an unlikely pair of heroes, Huck, a cat whose appreciation of simple pleasures is surpassed only by his desire to always stay the same, and his best friend, a hairball, and you heard that, a hairball that Huck hacked up, have messed with the space-time continuum with Hairball's latest invention. Can these two reverse the chaos that they have caused? Welcome to the panel, author of Huck and Hairball and the Litterbox Time Machine, Rich Moyer.
Hello.
Hi, Rich. In a double feature adventure, brothers Phineas and Ferb battle larger-than-life creatures and navigate a maze that has taken over their entire city. Readers will get a thrill out of watching these two engage in creative play while overcoming challenges that have been created by others. Please welcome to the panel animator, graphic novelist, and author of Phineas and Ferb Amazing Creature Double Feature, Joshua Pruett. Welcome, Josh.
Hi, everybody.
And finally, you may never look at your plate of fish the same after reading this graphic novel from Caldecott medalist and National Book Award winner Dan Santat. From the depths of the ocean comes a sweatshirt-clad fish boy named Sashimi, who is just trying to fit into his classroom environment. Please welcome to the panel, Dan Santat.
Hi, it's an honor to be here.
All right, well, welcome, you guys. We're glad to have you here, and thank you, librarians, for joining us. It's going to be a great conversation. All 3 of you are working in what I consider probably my favorite of formats, and that's the graphic novel. So for our first question, panelists, give us your best elevator pitch on what your book is about, and explain what you enjoy most about working in this format. Rich, we'll start with you, and then Joshua, and end with Dan. Rich?
Yeah, my elevator pitch. It's about a cat and a hairball team that time travel and screw up the universe. They're pretty much time detectives of sorts, that they cause their own mayhem most of the time, and it's science fiction based stories for kids.
And for our Phineas book, it's kind of an opportunity to take the characters that people love from the animated series that I work on, and a chance to work on a much bigger epic scale, things that we couldn't possibly afford to do on television, and even crazier jokes. So it's a real it's an open-ended adventure, and we hope it's the kind of thing that can grab other kinds of readers and folks who love graphic novels.
My book Sashimi is it's about a young one-of-a-kind sea creature who comes to a small town to investigate the rumors of a urban legend known as the Beast of Barnacle Bay, which closely matches his own description. And once he's there, he sneaks into an elementary school and blends in as one of the students at a local public school by taking the clothes from the lost and found. names himself Sashimi, and then lives in a classroom fishbowl with his new friend and confidant, Kevin, who is actually a girl goldfish. He befriends his fellow classmate by the name of Joey, who is a new kid who lacks friends and is constantly being bullied. And his grandfather is the town beast expert, obsessed with finding the actual beast. Um, I find the format fantastic because I can incorporate, witty jokes and puns along with the visual gags.
Wonderful. And I can tell you that all three of these pieces are coming across with the humor, with the silliness, with the fun. Josh and Rich, do you want to add anything to what you enjoy most about working in this particular format?
Sure. Yeah, I missed over that part of your question. Yeah, I grew up on graphic novels, and I think, I relate them a lot to movies that you see, and being able to pull movie dynamics into a book is so cool because, if young kids aren't well versed on cinema yet, you get to introduce them to ways of filmmaking through arranging a panel and invoking the kind of emotions that would be in like an upward shot of a camera angle or a establishing shot or all the Hitchcockian to Spielberg type tricks you can do that might be hard to explain otherwise. And I love that, and I think you can create a three-act play without even words. You can create a whole book, a wordless graphic novel, and it would still pull off. So.
Yeah, and to build on that, my experience is the same. Like I feel like you can do anything in comics, and it's maybe the most flexible of storytelling media, in my opinion, because it really is it's just the limits of your imagination. And when I was a kid, comics helped me read. It taught me to read, and that was the thing I wanted to do, and that's actually what got me into animation was loving comic books because it is an ideal storytelling medium, and especially for young people, I think.
I'm going to book the three of you the next time I visit with teachers about the importance of comics. Thank you. Never an argument, but just a discussion, right? But
Yeah.
thank you for the work you're doing in that format. I agree. It is there's a different level of storytelling that's happening there, and the what you're asking kids to do is kind of next level in terms of comprehension and bringing all these different pieces of information in. So thanks for the work you guys do there. Joshua, Phineas, let me get to the right part here. Yep, Phineas and Ferb are characters known by many readers through the popular cartoon and movie, which you were a writer for. You talked about already the advantages of being able to write about Phineas and Ferb in the graphic. Were there challenges of adapting cartoon or movie to the graphic novel format?
Absolutely, but most of those challenges felt like opportunities. One of the things I learned early on in my career working on the last comics on Earth, and working in comics for a number of years now, is that you are trying to boil down action into one action. You are trying to think of one action per panel, one visual gag. You are separating something that would be fluid on screen into something that has a tableau, something that's easy to understand, that has a clear silhouette. As I said, there's a lot of overlap in animation, but I think part of the joy of comics and the challenge of comics is thinking in those single images. How many images is it going to take me to tell this story? What's the most potent image I can think of? I have kids who are now 14, 16, but one of the things I noticed with them with comics when they were growing up is that, that single gag is what they respond to first and foremost. The physical comedy, something visual, right? And I think that's the superpower in comic books is so that was part of my process is going, oh, cool. Like I have, if this was a script, I could write this. I know exactly what it would be. But if it's going to be for comics, I need to think about what those primary images are going to be and how I can build a story on the back of those strong images.
So thank you for taking us through that. There are things that I just we don't think about right, that are going into the story that you're now bringing into with the graphics. This next question is for both Rich and Dan. Both of your graphic novels feature what I would say are very unique characters. Tell us about your main characters. Was there a particular inspiration for these? And how did they develop? Was there development over time? Rich, let's start with you. Your inspiration for Huck and Hairball, and how did it develop over time?
Oh my gosh, this is a long one. I'll try and truncate it a little bit. I thought of
Don't
an
truncate it.
idea.
We want all the details.
I thought of an idea called Space Cat when I was in my 20s, and I was a syndicated cartoonist with Tribune Media Services in Chicago, and we launched with just a few papers. It was like Boston Globe, Rocky Mountain News, and a handful of really a Philadelphia Inquirer and some things, but like a handful of really respectable papers, but like three, right? Or four. And so I developed an idea that was kind of a career-saving move, I thought at the time. And so I did it as a strip cartoon way back then as a thing called Space Cat, which was just a William Shatner Star Trek parody. So the cat was basically William Shatner, and the hairball was Leonard Nimoy, because then it just seemed to fit this like funny dynamic of, this really over intelligent hairball being smarter than a cat, which I just love that idea. And then I pitched it, and of course the syndicates turned it down right away because it didn't have anything to do with pets or family in a traditional way. It was science fiction, and that was just too much for a newspaper reader that was stuck on Marmaduke. And some great strips too. Like I shouldn't say Marmaduke isn't great, but like, you know what I mean, a very traditional mindset. And every 5 years or so, animation would perk up and option it from me and give a run at making it a TV show. I don't know how it kept getting into new people's file cabinets, but it did. And then, Curious Pictures out in New York picked it up for a little while. And then Celluloid Studios, before they were mixed with Will Vinton Studios. And, or I'm sorry, I'm mixing up the studio names. But anyway, a couple big studios. And it never really had a proper story. And it's kind of been the thing that's been stuck to my shoe for years and years and years. So I was like, I really want to make a story about these characters that are so great that people see things in them, but make a proper story about conflict and them getting into trouble. And so I wrote it as like a one and done sort of deal, but Union Square picked it up as a so far two graphic novel deal.
Well, I can tell you, I mean, I just had so much fun reading it. I can tell you that middle grade on up are gonna just find these characters really quite hilarious. So thank you for bringing them to us. Dan, same question for Sashimi. Inspiration for Sashimi, and how did he develop over time?
Yeah, so I've been in the business of children's bubble publishing for about 21 years now, and within that time, I've done over 120 books, and I've made some really great friendships. Some of which Mo Willems and Dave Pilkey, and they were two people that, while I worked with them on projects, they asked me like, "How come after all these years you've never done a series?" And it was something that was always on my mind. I knew I wanted to do a series, but I think initially in my career, I'm best known for doing picture books like Beagle and After the Fall and A First Time for Everything. And a lot of that, I think, dealt with a lot of just writer insecurity that I had. I thought I was a stronger artist than I was a writer. So there was like a lot of imposter syndrome. So it was important for me I think I wanted to foster some kind of credibility as a writer. So that type of writing was really, sincere and really deep into deep in the heart. And there was another part was that after winning a Caldecott medal, I didn't want to just be known as the Beagle guy, right? I wanted to spread myself out and do different material, and I felt like if I was stuck in a series, I would just be locked into this one particular storyline. Now the thing about, doing stories that are very sincere and from the heart is that they can be very emotionally taxing and emotional. And, especially after a book like A First Time for Everything, I was just exhausted. And, the thought of having to go into another book and carry that mindset it was just tiring. And I wanted to shift gears a little bit, and so maybe 2 years ago, I have two friends that you may all know, Jean Yang and Tin Pham. And we were at San Diego Comic-Con and we were kind of just talking about the concept of a reverse mermaid, right? And so typically a mermaid, you have the human upper body and the fish lower body. And then, we were saying, but what if it was a fish upper body and a lower human body? Would that be just as appealing? Um, and so I decided to draw it up. I took the idea home with me and I decided to draw it up. And originally the idea of Sashimi was this character with just a fish head. And he was just this silent bystander that would just gain popularity by doing absolutely nothing. He would just sit there with these cold, dead eyes, emotionless, and then everyone would say something like, "Oh, you're such a good listener. You're so cool." And as it panned out, it just was slowly turning into like this one joke kind of gag. And so I kept fleshing out the character, and as I was working it out, I think the best way to describe sashimi, to quote Sigmund Freud, is that sashimi ended up becoming my id. It was just this part of me that just says things that, would normally be kept inside, but he's the kind of character that just says things impulsively and out loud because he's very carefree and very witty. But at the same time, he's very sincere and sweethearted. Um, and so as I developed him more and more, he just kind of turned into me as a confident kid with no, like, absolutely no inhibitions, which I guess would be the healthy minded kid that I wish that I was. And so, sashimi definitely has strong opinions about things like LaCroix water and clowns, and a lot of things that I think both kids and adults can relate to.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we can't wait for more from Sashimi. And I have to say, I wasn't sure that Freud was going to come up in our
Yeah, I
conversation today,
didn't
but thank you for bringing
deep
it
cut
up.
there.
Yep.
Yeah.
The theme of this panel is mischief, mishaps, and mayhem. And the next set of questions I'd like to focus on each of these elements. Rich in Huck and Hairball, not Hunk. Huck's consumption of a particular fish is a major mishap that changes the course of history. For all the mayhem that a rip in the space-time continuum would cause, you also managed to keep it really zany and fun. What role does humor play in how you develop graphic novels for young readers?
Oh, that's great. I honestly try to put humor as a skin on last. And as zany and crazy of a place that this thing goes into, I try and think of like obscure reasons that make sense to me and that link these scenes together that that feel plausible if you know a cat. Like, I mean, this all starts off before this on like if you gave a cat a time machine, what would they do for it with it? And you're thinking, oh, where would you go in history? Would you go to Egypt where cats were worshipped? Would you go to, all these big events? And I kind of wanted to avoid all that and go to the root of what a cat would think, which was 6 minutes in the past, I would eat my food again, And so it's really based on that really guttural, knee-jerk reaction that's very human, even though he's a cat, he thinks in the now, right? And so this situation, they were trying to go back and fix time, and I just thought it'd be really fun to have the first fish that walked on land to be eaten by Huck, and it just, completely explodes what was already kind of broken. And so there's big stakes, and the way they go about solving stuff isn't, I tried to make it make sense in the end, but you couldn't guess how they got there.
I mean, the reality sometimes is so funny, right? So the idea that you're using kind of characteristics that would be normal characteristics of a cat and basing that for the humor just makes all sorts of sense, and it really comes through in the story. Rich, Josh, I have to confess that this was my introduction to Phineas and Ferb. I wasn't really of the Phineas and Ferb generation,
I
but
won't take it
for
personally. It's okay.
yeah, thank you. I really do appreciate that because it's not personal. For many readers, their mischief is quite well known through the television series, through the movie. Knowing that you'll have new readers and old fans, how do you approach creating a graphic novel that meets kind of the needs of both?
Oh, that's a really great question. I feel like you are definitely pulling double duty. So the way we split the graphic novel up is I wrote a 40 pager and my co-writer Scott Peterson wrote a 40 pager. And on some level there's wish fulfillment. We're both monster fans, we're both adventure movie fans. So Scott did like a monster movie milieu that we thought would be recognizable to folks who knew Phineas and Ferb or did not. And for mine, I did kind of a riff on Labyrinth. And so, there might be some readers whose parents will get that reference, but if not, certainly a maze is something really fun for young characters to explore, inside. One of the beautiful parts about working on Phineas and Ferb in comics or any format is that, you've got two really big comedic premises that you get to work with. You've got a mad scientist, Doofenshmirtz, who creates an innator that can invent something he uses to try to take over the tri-state area. And in the same episode, you've got Phineas and Ferb, who are hugely clever and creative kids. And they take an invention that helps them celebrate summer. So every single story you're telling, and we did the same here in the comics, is that we've got something big and wild and wonderful times two. So that was really our drive, is that, oh, great, some kid who's maybe never ever seen the TV series, how are we going to appeal to them? Well, that's how. We're going to have giant monsters, we're going to have giant mazes. I have giant bugs in my maze story. Doofenshmirtz has something called an elonginator because he wants to make himself taller because his brother Roger is taller than him on purpose. And his head ends up getting too big, and Perry the Platypus's tail ends up getting too big. So again, there's this visual opportunity that I think we both jumped into, with both feet, because I think that's what kids really respond to. You want to be smart, you want to be funny, and maybe even get some emotion in there. But again, the opportunity was, let's get wild, let's get wacky, let's, get something that's going to grab a new and a familiar reader.
Yeah. Well, and the bigness of it, right? The zaniness of it is bringing in that new reader, but you put in, you know, several callbacks and things for those old readers as well, without really making it hard for the new reader to really follow the story. So I
Great.
will tell you, as a new reader, it was really entertaining and easy to follow your Phineas and Ferb world. So thank you for
Great.
that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Louis. Appreciate it.
Dan, in Sashimi, and folks, by the way, if you were wondering what a reverse mermaid looks like, you're about to see it. A fish boy, or like himself actually says, basically a reverse mermaid, causes quite a bit of mayhem when he comes to shore. Some of the mayhem is specific to the story, like the renewed search for the beast of Barnacle Bay, but some of this is everyday mayhem, like the chaos when a new student joins a classroom. What specific characteristics or themes were you hoping to kind of bring to your human readers through this unique fish boy character?
So as I said before, Sashimi's a carefree, witty, sincere and sweethearted kid, but I think if you were to look at him in terms of the type of kid that he is at a school, he's gonna be the weird kid. So he's going to be clearly different, but I mean, to follow the pun, he's a fish out of water. But what I'm hoping for is, I'm trying to establish this kind of world where you're invested in everybody in the community, and so actually every character in this world will have their own unique sense of weirdness, and so as a result, he actually blends in perfectly because everyone just has their own quirks. Disregard the fact that, he is orange, he has huge eyes, he doesn't have a nose. But actually no one notices that fact that he's not human. They just assume like, okay, well, he's enrolled in the school, and so he must be a school student. And so the rules of logic are kind of completely off the rails with this, and I can get away with a lot of things. Um, and so one of my most important things that I want to emphasize in this is I'm hoping that kids will be able to see themselves in this world or embrace the aspect that things that make you unique or things that can make you stand out and be special.
Mhm.
Hoping maybe they might see a little quirkiness of themselves in one of the characters or the side characters. And then maybe they could feel like they belong to this community. Um, so the idea is that Sashimi probably is the main character of this entire series, but that everyone in the world would be very fleshed out and have unique personalities and have a part to play. I think even one could say that maybe a better title for the series might have been Barnacle Bay. But I want everyone to just be invested in the world and the side stories and especially like the inside jokes. And that my hope is that the kids will have their favorite characters who aren't necessarily sashimi, but then
Yeah.
as series go on, there'll be callback references from book one or book two, and then we just build on those jokes until it
Mm.
turns itself into its own long story thread. So, like for example, one joke that I have is that Sashimi gets kicked out of the grocery store, and then he's banned there for life. And then by book two, you'll see this billboard that of people who are banned from the store, and then you see Sashimi on there. And then in book two, he sneaks in with a fake mustache and he gets banned again because they think it's just a man with a mustache. And so as the series builds on, book three, book four, book five, or whatever, you're going to just see this wall of times that sashimi gets banned from the grocery store. And kids can just recall, like, oh, I remember that happened in book two, that happened in book three. And then the world just kind of builds on itself.
Yeah. Yeah. So those kids that are following that story are making those connections to the previous books. And I like that you said that, really, really that kids will see themselves in not just sashimi, but in other characters that you've created within that world. I love that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Uh, Rich, I'd like to now bring the conversation around to process. You talked earlier about where your characters and story came from. Can you talk about the process for you for creating a graphic novel? Where does it start for you, and is it similar with each new graphic that you create?
Yeah, I I'm kind of a natural creative director kind of guy, so I like having ideas and coming up with wackiness is not a hard task. It's really structure. So I try and be a planner and I try and figure out the bookends of a story. What where does it start? Where does it stop? What created your inciting incident where everything fell apart? How do they round this thing up? And then, getting there and setting up beats like a false win or a near win or whatever, all these things. Um, I like to set the kind of the tent poles of what's gonna happen. And then, it's really easy to make stuff up that's zany, right? But you don't want a story that feels like you're going, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and, without any glue that feels, even if in the stupid world of cat and hairballs, you got to have some idiot logic that ties it together, where there's, oh, of course a cat wants to eat his food again, or whatever, and it makes sense to a kid, it makes sense to an adult that even if there's no cats walking on 2 feet and talking to their friend the hairball, in this world that makes sense. So I try and they call it planners or pantsers, I think, by the seat of your pants. And I'm more of a planner, I think, because I can come up with crazy ideas, and in fact I try and come up with a lot of crazy ideas and then
Yeah.
just kind of see which the best one wins.
Yeah.
um, and I've heard, I keep picking up quotes from people, because people say it so much better than I do. But I heard somebody say that the ending's got to be a surprise, but inevitable. So it's got to feel like inevitable,
Yeah.
but also a surprise, right? So I love that, right? It's got to
Hmm.
feel like a natural consequence of what happened. in a surprising way.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I mean, that is exactly how we as a reader, that's what we're looking for. Joshua, listeners may also be familiar with some of your other work, including Last Comics on Earth, a spinoff of the insanely popular middle grade series Last Kids. How was the process adapting a cartoon like Phineas and Ferb different from kind of creating a spin-off of an already established series?
There was some overlap
Mm,
because essentially you're dealing with personalities that are going to be familiar to half of your audience, but you're portraying them in a new format. It's a new version of them.
yeah,
And so I think creatively our number one goal was like, oh, let's make sure that the stories feel high concept, but that the characters still have the voice, that they
mm,
retain the voice. So there's a rhythm there. You're talking about personality types and keeping them relatable. Largely like I feel really blessed because I like the last kids on Earth, like I can hear them in my head because
yeah,
they kind of come out of a tradition of like I want to say Scooby-Doo. It's like you've got these wonderful personality types, these best friends who are bouncing off each other. And that dynamic, I feel like, is something that people connect with. I think young readers, I think older readers, people see themselves. So even on Phineas and Ferb, we're talking about strong personality dynamics, how these folks talk to each other. And then in the case of like Doofenshmirtz and Perry, it's like we've got a mad scientist and his nemesis who happen to be best friends. And so some of the fun there is like you're leaning into like, oh, what if you hurt your best friend's feelings? Or, what if there's something that is unresolved between these best friends, or they can't decide where they're going to eat lunch in the midst of their fight? And so that's usually where I focus a lot of my energy is at the beginning, is just making sure that that still feels the way it should feel. There's a signature that
yeah,
is Last Kids. There's a signature that is Phineas and Ferb.
right.
And I feel like that's one of my primary responsibilities.
Awesome. Thank you for that. The for Dan, this is actually I can't believe this has gone as fast as it's gone. We got about 3 minutes left. But Dan, book creation requires a whole community of professionals bring a title to print. But Sashimi is a solo project for you, as you both the illustrator and the author. But you've also had opportunities to work both as an illustrator, author, and as an illustrator. How's the process of creation different for you when you're sole creator versus when you're in collaboration with another creator?
So the thing I enjoy about the collaborative process is that I regard it as a learning process. I like to
Mhm.
collaborate with people because I can learn from different authors who approach story from a different point of view.
Yeah,
And I've been very fortunate to have worked with some very talented authors like Lisa Yee, Mac Barnett, Laurel Snyder, Mo Willems, Dave Pilkey, and all them. And the other thing that is beneficial is that collaborating allows me the space and freedom to get my own work done, and it's not rushed. I don't have to push out a book every year to make a living. I can work on something and I can present it out to the world when it's ready. Now, when I'm working individually, it's not necessarily a solo experience because my work would not be made possible without the wonderful efforts of my editor Connie Shu, who's been one of my best friends for the last 15 years. She's been my longtime editor and arbiter of taste. And she truly brings out the best in me. I've done 3 books with her. Beagle won the Caldecott Medal, First Time for Everything won the National Book Award. And then After the Fall, which I personally regard as, like one of my proudest works, which was a love letter to my wife. And so there's a remarkable track record there. And then her assistant Nico, who's a editorial assistant, he also offers a fantastic additional perspective. And so every other week we'll get together on Thursdays and we'll work like a comedy writer room, and we'll just do punch ups and things like that. And so it's honestly the most fun I've had in years.
Love that. And I love this, I mean, the collaborative process that's coming in through all of your work. Well, gentlemen, this was really, truly a pleasure. I have one more question. We're going to go real fast before we close. But, sometimes we as librarians do get some pushback from parents, from teachers about the value of graphic novels as kind of reading light or not real reading. In one sentence, what's best argument for why this format is so important for all readers? Rich, we'll start with you.
I think, if you're a reluctant reader, you can get in right away. There's easy access and there's a big emotional punch. And I think as a comic book reader as a kid, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and I think I was reading in between panels as much as I was reading the panels, and
Mhm.
it sparked my imagination. And I think that like spark starts the love for books, and it goes into Stephen King to whatever else you're into, right?
Joshua?
Yeah, I think Rich, I mean, nails it. It's about the love first. And I think there's there's an empirical and scientific reasoning that we could argue, and we could say that, not everyone responds to words. And it's like, as human beings, we respond to visuals first anyway. So we could make that argument. But I think usually when I'm talking to parents, I'm saying a comic is going to get your kid off their phone faster. And that's, we want to encourage that.
Yeah.
And I think a comic has superpowers that I think other early reading does not.
Awesome. Dan?
Yeah, I too was also a reluctant reader, and graphic novels and comics really helped me find my own way. My reading comprehension was awful. I was a slow reader. Graphic novels were my salvation. There's just something about the pairing of images and text that really helped me. And I became a ravenous reader. My comprehension improved. And I think we're all probably very familiar with the recent study that said that reading for fun has gone down 40% in the last 20 years. And so
Right.
my personal goal is to make reading fun again, and
Yes.
so my emphasis is that, the books right now that I'm going to be making are for the kids. And we need to foster a love and enjoyment of reading again.
Yes. Oh, well, I mean, I can't say it any better, and I won't. Thank you. We're really, you guys are really bringing the fun, and the joy and the enjoyment in the works that you've got out, coming out here recently. Once again, I want to thank our panel, Rich Moyer, Joshua Pruett, Dan Santat. You can look for Phineas and Ferb Amazing Creature double feature this November, I believe. Joshua, is that correct? And both Sashimi and Huck and Hairball in 2026. Thank you, all the library people out there, for joining us. And next is the final session of the day, the closing keynote with Jason Reynolds, which I can guarantee you won't want to miss that. So thanks again, gentlemen, and thank you, readers and librarians, for joining us today.
Thank you very much,
It's a
everybody.
pleasure.
Thank
Thank
you
you for all that you
guys.
do. Thank you. Thank you.